Over the last almost 13 years, the TF team has consistently been changing weapons to increase their viability or to balance them to a degree where it's not the definitive choice. Pyro's weapons are no different, with plenty of them being buffed to increase usage or straight up nerfed into the ground due to the stats being exploited. Of course, not every weapon has needed such a drastic change to them, but what about the ones that did need it? Let's take a look at some. Now, I'm not going to go through every single drastic change, more so the weapons that got such a big change that it morphed a major component to work less effectively than before. With that being said, I'll be limiting each section of weapons to 2 apiece. If you want me to speak about weapons that aren't mentioned through this one, then let me know down below that you'd like to see a second video on this. Video interactivity helps the channel grow, and I generally am curious on your thoughts, so if you want more videos at a quicker pace and want to help the channel grow, go ahead and voice your opinions. With that being said, let's begin with the Pyro's primary weapons. The first new primary to be added to the game back in 2008, the Backburner, was changed quite drastically from its original design. On the update page, it is stated that the guaranteed critical hits from behind would still be there. However, rather than spending more ammo for air blasts, you wouldn't have the option to do so at all. Instead, the other upside was an extra 50 health for the Pyro when equipped. Now, I can't say how that was back in the day, as I joined a year later in 2009, but a Pyro running around with 225 health can't be easy to dispose of. The Pyro themselves are of average speed and health to begin with, so having a new feature barred from the unlock with upsides of crits from behind and more health is more than enough to make up for the lack of air blast. When equipped, the Pyro had more health than the Soldier, with the second largest pool of health in game behind the Heavy. Obviously, the team at Valve saw how much of a nuisance this was for other players dealing with the Backburner and removed the bonus health just a little over a month after it was added. They did try and add a different upside on April 29th, 2010 with a 20% damage bonus to the Backburner. Again, this sounds pretty overpowered considering that you'd take down weaker classes with hardly any trouble, and add that to the critical hits and you'd have an unstoppable powerhouse if you Ubered a Pyro wielding this weapon back then. On May 19th, they reduced it down to 15%, but that's still a pretty strong stat for a Pyro to have. It took nearly another year to change drastically, as on April 14th, 2011, the restriction on air blast was removed and added the 150% increase to ammo cost, as well as lowering the damage bonus yet again down to 10%. They did some fiddling around with the bonus damage a bit more before ultimately dropping it on June 27, 2012 in the Pyromania update. The Backburner certainly went through a lot of changes in the first 4 years, going from ridiculously overpowered to now being an essential tool for flanking. I think the biggest thing that ultimately needed nerfing throughout all of this was the health bonus. That is pretty ridiculous, and as far as I'm aware, no weapon in the game at this point of its life gives any class anywhere near 50 more health. Closest thing I can think of is the Battalion's backup with 20 more, but that's on an already buffed class unlike Pyro, so it makes more sense overall. So in my opinion, the Backburner has been nerfed very significantly. Next on the list is everyone's favourite combo enabling primary, the Degreaser. Released in the Manconomy update on September 30th, 2010, the Degreaser was fairly simple in design compared to most at launch. There was one upside and one downside, that being a 65% faster weapon switch for the up and a minus 25% burn damage for the down. This of course allowed for faster switch into secondary and melee weapons as it does now, however with ridiculous speeds compared to what it has today. And not only that, it applied for both holstering and deploying weapons across the board, not just to and from the Degreaser. As for the burn damage, it just meant that it would take longer to take down an enemy if you held down mouse 1, which is arguably what a lot of players want implemented somehow to the Pyro, as they honestly do like to complain about it a lot. Overall though, this was made for comboing and comboing hard. Keep in mind that the Extinguisher was still in its ridiculous stage where, spoiler for one of the melee spots, it would crit burning players and do 50% less on those who weren't ignited. Combine that with the flare gun as well and you had a walking wrecking machine. You could argue the Degreaser is still the best primary for Pyro, but no one could have any doubt back then, as this would absolutely mess enemy players up and mess them up quick. One puff of flame was all it took to be able to go on a damage spree with your secondary and melee. Oh, and did I mention it still only took 20 ammo for air blast instead of 25? Didn't think so. How long did it take for it to be changed? Just a little under a year in fact, with an undocumented change on July 22nd, 2011 changing the minus 25% burn damage to minus 25% burn damage penalty, which wasn't really too significant to the stats at the time, at least not yet. This only changed it to the afterburn, which for combo pyros is not a very big concern. Their first dent in the armor of the Degreaser happened in the Pyromania update, where they added the counterbalance of a minus 10% damage penalty. Not much, but it was a start at least. On December 17th, 2015, over 3 years later, it really had a tough break. Get it because it was the update name. This update is what pretty much sealed the fate of the Degreaser to what it has become now. It removed the boosted all-around switch speed of 65% to a 60% faster switch to speed and a 30% faster switch from speed. It took away the first somewhat major change of the minus 10% damage penalty and added a 25% increased air blast cost and changed the afterburn penalty of 25% to 66% instead, which is incorrectly labelled as it actually is minus 75%, and ever since then it stayed the same. The primary function of switching to your other weapon weapons faster stayed the same throughout the almost 10 years it's been around. It certainly has been fixed for the better, as what was once an insanely powerful tool for combo pyros has now been reduced, but to a less ridiculous degree rather than a full burial as many weapons in the past have suffered. I mean, if people are still saying the Degreaser is one of the better choices for pyros, then it can't be that bad of a change. But compared to its initial launch, it's changed a damn lot, so I think that warrants it being in here. Moving on to the secondaries now, and let's just get the easy one out of the way. The reserve shooter, the tryhard's choice, and for a good reason. You could argue that it's been buffed in certain areas, but we're talking about one area, one specific irrefutable area that made people who went against pyros using it get annoyed, frustrated, and any other descriptive word for mad. But we'll get there soon enough. The reserve shooter was released in the Uber update on June 23rd, 2011, and was initially only for the soldier. It had a plus 15% faster all-around weapon switch speed, mini crits on airborne targets for 3 seconds after switching to it, and a minus 50% clip size, reducing the clip from 6 shots to 3. It took the TF team less than 4 months to add it to the Pyro, in an undocumented patch on October 13th, 2011, in the Maniversary update and sale. It took almost 2.5 years for the first change to happen to the weapon in what would buff it rather than nerf it, as on the 7th of February 2014, the clip size of the reserve shooter went up from 3 to 4 shots, and time to mini crit airborne targets increased from 3 seconds to 5 seconds. Now I saved talking about the Pyro section until here, as the mini crits on airborne targets is what made this an essential secondary pick, especially with the early Degreaser stats. Pyros could easily airblast enemies into the air, switch incredibly fast to the reserve shooter, and deal hundreds of damage quickly, even more than the flare guns. This created an improper balance between soldier and pyros, as soldier needed to work harder in order to hit enemies into the air, whereas pyros only needed to use their mouse 2 buttons. The next change to the weapon came in a tough break update, as the all-around switch speed was changed to a 20% faster switch to speed and a 15% faster switch from speed, as well as forcing players to hit enemies into the air rather than dealing crits on those who were jumping. This of course was no problem to the pyro, as they never had an issue to begin with. It was just another area they couldn't exploit. But all good things come to an end, as in the Jungle Inferno update on October 20th, 2017, Pyro's ability to mini crit enemies knocked into the air by air blast was removed, and changed the targets flying with a thermal thruster across both soldier and pyro. This was the killing blow to an easy exploit for the pyro. While yes, this was an essential buff for soldiers, so mini crits were earned in the same way for both classes, it is undoubtedly what killed the usage for the majority of pyros using it. This isn't to say it's terrible for the pyro, far from it. I use it from time to time, and it actually feels like you earn those mini crits when you reflect projectiles into an enemy and knock them into the air. It was that one small minute detail that made it unfair for soldiers, and once that got removed, it seemingly killed its viability for pyro, and players moved on to other secondaries, which is why I deem this a significant nerf of pyro overall. Surprisingly, when it comes to secondary weapons, pyro's flare guns actually got buffed rather than nerfed. So instead, let's take a weapon that you could argue got either buffed or nerfed, the panic attack. Released on December 22nd, 2014 in the Dismissmas update of that year, it had much different stats to what it has nowadays. Its initial stats were a 34% faster reload time, being able to hold 4 shots and then firing once it reached its limit. Its rate of fire increased as your health decreased, with the downside of the spread of the bullets increasing as your health decreased too. These stats really played on the name of being a weapon that you relied more on when, well, panicking. You could switch to it and quickly burst a ton of pellets onto your enemy to try and survive a little longer. The first change came in the gunmetal update on July 2nd, 2015, with the base fire rate increasing from 15% to 30%, the reload speed increasing from 33% to 50%, and added an increased switch to speed that was at plus 50%, allowing you to whip it out quicker, playing even more on its name. All in all, this was a buff and a good one at that. The next change was in the tough break update, which seems to be a running trend for weapons at the moment, stopping the weapon from auto-fire and instead letting you hold onto the shots until you release them. This made for the ability to unload on an unsuspecting enemy, and yet again can be seen as a buff over anything else. Then the controversial change happened. In the Jungle Inferno update, the panic attack was reworked pretty much entirely into a different kind of weapon. The old attributes were wiped clean, and we got a plus 50% increased switch speed, 50% more pellets per shot, a 30% decrease in damage, and it now fired in a wide fixed shot pattern with the pattern growing with successive shots, resetting after the player stops firing or reloaded. It also came with a standard 6 shots per clip like the stock shotgun did. It got its current stats on the March 28th, 2018 update, labelled the Blue Moon update, with the worst case shot pattern reduced by 40% and the damage penalty reduced to only minus 20%. Like I said at the start, this can be seen in either way. You could see this as a huge nerf as it completely removed what was unique to it before, or you could see it as a buff like I do. Ever since this change, I've used it as my go-to shotgun, as I think it's better than the stock since it can do more damage than it up close, which is what a pyro is good at. However, I can see where the people that think it's a nerf come from. Its initial stats had it as more of a last resort weapon that could save you in a sticky situation, with small essential additions like a faster switch to speed buff, and then the change removed what made the panic attack stand out from the rest, turning it into a more souped up stock shotgun. shotgun. I can completely see both sides. In my eyes, I see the changes from Jungle Inferno as a good thing, but again, I can see how these changes can be seen as a terrible decision, and so ultimately this entry is up to personal choice. Let me know what your thoughts are on this. I might explore this subject a little more in the future, who knows. Finally, we head into the melees, and really there are only two choices overall that I can have here. Let's go with the obvious one first, the Extinguisher. Released in the 2008 Pyro update alongside the Backburner, its original stats had the main gimmick of granting critical hits against burning enemies, and a minus 50% damage stat against those who are not. Very simple, but very powerful. Note that there isn't any limit to swing speed like the modern stats. You can see how this would be an essential equip, and when the Degreaser was added 2 years later, it would pretty much be the meta choice for combo pyros. It would take 6 years for the Extinguisher to have a stat change, as in the Love and War update on June 18th, 2014, the critical hit on burning enemies stat was tweaked to only mini-crit those from the front and keeping the full crit from behind. A pretty insignificant change overall, but it did change when a pyro would use it. A more flank-oriented approach would reward more damage, but it was still viable for comboing weaker classes from the front. So overall, it just changed how you would approach certain classes. It would only take a year and a half this time for the next change, as in the Tough Break update, the stats were changed arguably for the worst looking back now. It still kept the 100% chance to crit against burning enemies, but came with a lot more downfalls. The minus 50% damage against non-burning players was changed to minus 33%, it had a 20% slower attack speed, and finally a 75% slower switch to speed. This ultimately made it so that it was best to use this as a finishing blow weapon, which is ironic considering the stats we have now does that better. Overall though, it would become a pretty mediocre weapon unless you had the Degreaser equipped. You would still have a slow switch to speed, but it would make it somewhat quicker than usual. This would stay like this for another 2.25 years until the Blue Moon update, where we finally got the modern day Extinguisher. The old stats were pretty much erased yet again and received plenty of new kinks. Attacks would now mini-crit burning enemies and then extinguish them. However, the Pyro would now gain a damage boost based on the remaining duration of Afterburn, ranging from 86 damage minimum to 167 damage maximum. When the Pyro does a killing blow to a burning enemy, they would also be granted a speed boost. The base damage was also reduced by 33%, going from 65 to 43, holstering 35% slower and doing no random critical hits. This in my opinion emphasizes a finishing blow weapon far better than the last iteration due to the speed boost and slower holster speed. Managing to do more damage based on Afterburn is a very unique mechanic, and overall the Extinguisher is in a good place at the moment. Saying this though, it cannot be denied that the weapon has been nerfed a ton since its original version, which goes to show just because a weapon is still good doesn't mean it wasn't better or objectively overpowered before, which gives plenty of proof that the Extinguisher has been significantly nerfed. The final weapon is another top choice for Pyro mains, the Power Jack. Released alongside the Degreaser in the Manconomy update, the Power Jack was basically a souped up version of what it is now. Not only did it do 25% more damage, the equivalent to what the Back Scratcher does, but it restored 75 health on kill, which would overheal the Pyro that used it. So you could potentially be going up against a 250 health Pyro if you just killed one of your teammates. The one downside it came with was no random critical hits, but that means jack compared to how deadly the upsides are in comparison. Oh, and not only that, you were still able to claim the 75 health from killing an enemy with another weapon if you switched to the Power Jack just before they died, so that sounds fun. The first change on January 10th, 2011, which was undocumented, was removing this bug so that the 75 health was only gained by killing with the actual weapon. The next change would come just 3 months later on April 14th, 2011 in the Hatless update, where the no crit attribute was replaced with a minus 25% damage one, nullifying the bonus damage and leaving the only upside to being health on kill. It also gained a plus 20% melee vulnerability when active stat as well, which was a good step towards trying to make it more fair for everyone. Then on July 10th, 2013 it had another change, adding a 15% increased movement speed while deployed and changing the vulnerability from melee weapons to all sources of damage, again making it fairer for enemies dealing with it. Its final changes came within 2015, the first being in the Gunmetal update, reducing health gain from 75 HP to 25, which stopped Pyros from getting ridiculous amounts of health from a single kill. The second change occurred in the Tough Break update, again undocumented, removing the health gained on kill from overhealing, meaning Pyros could only gain health up until the maximum of 175. And that's where the Power Jack stands today. Speed boost and health on kill with the downsides of being more vulnerable to everything while using it. A much more balanced melee weapon compared to what came before when it first released for sure. The ability to not only do more damage than usual, but gaining a ton of health as well as being able to overheal with said health sounds like a nightmare to deal with, so it can easily be seen why this melee got nerfed significantly hard compared to a lot of weapons in the game. And there we have it, a bunch of Pyro weapons that were nerfed pretty hard. Of course, most of these came out just fine in the end, but some couldn't come out in the same way. What do you think? Do you think some of these changes were unnecessary, or do you think they're well deserved considering their previous iterations were more than enough reason to change to be fairer for everyone? Let me know down below, as well as some ideas for changes to other weapons you think would work. I can think of a certain couple of weapons that people would like to change, so go ahead with your thoughts. And well, that'll do it for this one. This has been your Pyro enthusiast BonOakley signing out. See you guys in the next one.
Hey, thanks for watching this video. Sorry, I'm pretty hungry right now, so I'm going to binge on some chocolate. So, see ya, I guess.